Welcome to the Digital Business Leader Level Up. This is a virtual lunch and learn podcast series with Majesty AliNICOLE WOW. And that is me, and also the brilliant King Rob Deptford. And we are back with another lunch and learn for you. We want to help expand what you're doing in the digital business space so that your leadership really stands out in the way that's most meaningful. King Rob, of course, glad to be back with you to provide value for others.
Well, you keep inviting me back, so must be doing something right.
Of course, you know that.
Glad to be here, of course.
I'm glad to have you. Your leadership authority is so beneficial to others, and I applaud you just on the level that you exude, for others. You're such a great example, and I think it's important as business leaders are continuing, to level up, that they start really focusing on those strengths that they have and the greatness. Sometimes people focus a lot on their weaknesses, and sometimes that's not the best thing to focus on, especially when you're leveling up. Sometimes maybe you need to delegate that to somebody else and keep improving in where you're great. Your thoughts around that?
Yeah, I think that's important. I think it's one of the things you recognize probably through experience more so than being able to see it up front earlier in your career.
Right,
But
right.
as you gain experience, you realize, okay, I've got these things that I'm really good at. I've got these
Mhm.
things that are what we sometimes call burnout skills,
Right,
things that you
right.
have to do, but they're like a necessary evil, and
Right, the
you
lightning
can't do them.
skills that
Yeah, you
become
can't do them
strikes of lightning.
productively. But when you figure those things out, you can start to make a strategy around, okay, what
Right,
should I be spending my time on? And it really should be your strengths. And for the
absolutely.
things that you're not as good at, well, other people out there are good at those things. So that's where you can
Right.
look to delegate.
Absolutely, absolutely. It's okay to learn a variety of different skills. Of course, I'm definitely big on that. But there are areas that no matter what, even if you're good at certain things, there are certain areas that you really need to allow someone else's talent to come in and provide that, especially if it's something that's more consistent that has to be done in your business. Now, if that person ends up getting sick or maybe has to take a vacation, then you're not at a total disadvantage of not knowing how to be able to apply yourself in that way. So it's good to know certain skills, but definitely don't spend the great majority of your time trying to improve in those areas where someone else, can definitely help you, right?
Yeah, well, and let's recognize it's not always possible, right? Like if you're a solopreneur like you and I, there are things that we have to do that we don't like doing, and you just do them
Mhm.
because that's business.
Right,
But
right.
but as again, as you develop, there are ways around doing some of those things, right? Like as we're recording this, we just finished tax time, and I
Hmm.
did my own taxes this year. But for me, that is a burnout skill. Like
Right.
anything administrative like that, I should be farming that out to somebody else
Yeah,
who's good at it. But
right.
I decided to try it with some software that was supposed to
Mhm.
simplify things this year, and I will not do that again.
Right. But you had to, trial and
But
error. You had to test it out for sure. It's
yeah,
interesting that, we kind of started with this. Normally, we don't have any planned topic. We just know that we're going to come and provide some value, of course, and turn it into some type of micro training, for others while they're on their lunch breaks, so to speak. But I think it's a good topic kind of to jump off on, just in terms of, prioritization, and especially, in the digital space. And you brought up something in terms of the solopreneur aspect. And there are times where, like for me, that I do have to bring in others, but not necessarily keep them consistently around in terms of team. They're more seasonal when it comes, to certain things. And so there are ways, definitely, when being a solo business owner, so to speak, that you can incorporate different people at different times. And depending on obviously your budget, there are times where you may have interns that are providing services in exchange for class credit, or so. Also, there's Fiverr.com if you need to be able to delegate, a few things. So team building can be a very non-linear way, and just the way you leverage it. So that's, something in terms of business leaders leveling up.
Yeah, I mean, we're in the age of opt-in work, so there are tons of people out there on sites like Upwork or Fiverr
Yeah.
who are offering services in their own area of expertise. So it's a great place to go look for that help that you might need, even if it's only occasionally.
Right.
Uh, that's something that you can opt into, so to speak, when necessary. So why not? I know lots of people who have virtual assistants
Absolutely.
that they use, and not even on a regular basis. Sometimes it's just
Mhm.
as needed. So
Yeah, that's pretty much how my operation has run throughout the years, is that even with having a personal assistant at certain seasons, it just depends on what your business, what the operations are. And there are times you need a break, and there are times you definitely need to delegate. And even though the digital space is very efficient in terms of how you can leverage, your time, and especially, we talk a lot, King Rob, in terms of systemization and even syndicating. But even with that, that takes time, to do. Um,
yeah,
Sometimes you have to bring people in, to do that. But I think, a good training, for us is definitely to provide different ways, which you already are in a sense, of the delegation, and business leaders actually putting that as a high priority. Is where do you need to actually start delegating? Um, and where do you need to hone in on your mastery as it relates to obviously your strengths? And can you skill up? Yes, in some areas where maybe it's not your big thing, you can, but as we've been talking, you don't really want to spend a lot of time there. So start looking at different options of how you can be best supported, for your business during this time. King Rob.
yeah.
Mm-hmm.
It might not even necessarily be something that you're that you might classify as one of your weaknesses too. So
Right.
sometimes it's a strength that you have. It's something you enjoy doing, but you need to let it go
You need
because
to
there
let
are
it
other
go.
places in your business that need
Mm-hmm.
attention. So, you know,
Absolutely.
for me, I like I look at all the videos that I edit because
Mm-hmm.
I'm creative, right? And
Right, right,
I actually enjoy the process, but it's one of those pieces of the business that takes the most time. So,
right.
I could be putting together a 5 or 10 minute video and it can take me all day to edit because I get all these creative elements going in there.
Right.
And sometimes you can't afford to lose a whole day. So those are
You're
things
right
you have
about
to look
that.
at. Even though you enjoy it, it may be something that you also have to look at getting some help with.
Oh, absolutely. And even on the note of that, because I do a lot in terms of the productionpreneurship as a whole, even, teaching and training on that, because it's so many different elements. And one of the, if you want to call it systems or systematizing, types of approaches that I take when I'm teaching and training others, especially in production, in terms of the ones that do take a lot of time, is that you almost have to operate like a university and create the base content in terms of what is going to be something that you're going to want to go out, of course, for your audience and be syndicated, that you can actually carve out some time to do that and do it in micro formats, and then save much of the larger projects for maybe products, so to speak, and then you can always lead them, into that. But it does take time when you're doing, productions. And if you're not the best, at that, then like Rob was saying, that even though you enjoy it, so to speak, it may be that at certain times you do need to delegate it. And so let's say that you do have some content that you want consistently going out to others. Now, if you want it to be quick and efficient like the news, then maybe that's where you do delegate that to someone else who can produce that faster, where some of the other elements that take a little bit longer, like, like artistry, like you like to paint, yeah, you could just paint like overnight. Yeah. So if you really like the creative process and it does take a little bit longer, then you can even break that up as you're doing that, but it doesn't have to feel obligated, to go out. But that's a whole nother training within itself, King Rob.
Probably so, yes.
Oh my gosh, yeah. There's so many different elements to it. Now, since we brought this up, since you went there, I guess we're going to have to go there now, because now I'm itching to say like a lot of different things around this. And since both of us are the highly creative individuals and leverage so many different facets and aspects of that content creation aspect, I want to say to digital business leaders, if in fact you are not leveraging your creative side and leveraging the media, maximizing it with whether it is different levels and formats of video communication, or whether it is podcasting, whether it is blogging, or so you want different elements to be able to demonstrate your expertise. So a kind of a good focus, King Rob, I believe, is that for prioritization, if leaders could set aside at least a weekend to brainstorm and come up with creative content that they can, as we talk a lot about batch producing, or I call it the base content, if it's going to be things that you want consistently, pumping out, is being able to take some time to create it in micro format, in micro training. Micro learning is one of the largest expanding types of formats that people are really desiring to ingest, especially during these times. So when you can create short formats and then look at other ways in the production where it's not going to take as long. King Rob, something that I like to do is that I'll create different versions even of the same content. I'll create one that may be the raw, not necessarily always the raw format of it, but one that's maybe not as beefed up with the bells and whistles, and I'll have that one to go out so it doesn't delay me. But then I'll come back and create a different version, and it, believe it or not, it doesn't actually take more time, so to speak, because I don't know, I think I got momentum around it, maybe.
Yeah.
That could be. But the thing about it is that I let some things come out in stages. Some things they'll have music, some won't. I'll come back at another point and add music to the same thing and beef it up. But believe it or not, I don't find that it actually takes me more time to do it. When I'm actually trying to do everything in one particular format, that's when I find that it takes the longest. But it's something about moving the energy that then gets the momentum going, where you can, kind of, mass produce, in a sense. So that's just, that's just a thought. That's just a consideration, for leaders. They need to be leveraging all of that for sure.
Yeah, I think so. And I think people worry that people are going to see the same content repeatedly in your feeds, wherever you happen to be posting. But I wouldn't be too concerned about that, because even on platforms like LinkedIn or YouTube, or really most of the platforms, when you first post something, it's a very, very small percentage of
It
people
is.
who
It
see
is.
that in their feed. So the next time you post it, even if it's exactly the same, it's likely to be a different crowd seeing that
That's seeing it.
second post. So
Absolutely. And I've experienced that for sure over the years. And especially as it relates to YouTube, and it's fascinating. And King Rob, I've showed you a couple of things, in terms of how that is, even with some of the numbers, where I could post a video, and of course on YouTube you can't post the exact same video. There has to be something different.
yeah,
And so, but I'll post a version of it, and then maybe a shorter version, even if it's a second, or maybe there's a filter or so. And sometimes I'll post them back to back, and it is amazing how who sees it the first time, who sees it the second, who sees it the third, and then how it just kind of, it's like in canon, singing in rounds, so to speak. And it's phenomenal how that happens. So something you brought up that I want to address in terms of people being concerned about seeing the same content, and you made a great point in terms of even how algorithms, put things out. But just as we say that consistency is key, right? Some things that are repetitive are necessary. Now, it's different if it's like the same thing every day. But if there's something that you posted, let's say you posted it earlier in the week, and then you put out a different format of it, maybe later that week, or maybe not in the same week. Maybe it is a week later, or even a week or two later. You can still be able to gauge it and test out that type of format, even to see what works well and what doesn't, or who missed it. And sometimes I remember putting up posts even on LinkedIn or different ones where I would say, in case you missed it. And I'll even do that even on YouTube sometimes. I'll post a different version of it, and the response is great. So like I said, you brought up something really great in terms of don't get too concerned about it. But going back to what I said earlier, is whenever you are creating and then you decide, like you're a university, so to speak, and let's say that you have a program that you want to feature, or maybe you've done a talk around it, you can take excerpts from that talk, or you can just use the same one, but maybe put a different filter on it or something, and let that be something that comes out weekly, or something that comes out where, in case somebody missed it, they didn't see it. But even for people who did see it, if they see it again, maybe it catches their eye this time and it didn't before. Your thoughts, King Rob?
Yeah, I think, if you follow some of the big creators on different platforms, you'll see through, over the course of months or years, you'll see a lot of content gets recycled. It
Oh,
comes back
yeah.
up. And most of them have scheduled content, but
Right.
think of the people I follow, Sean Cannell on YouTube, or
Yes.
Gary Vaynerchuk on
Yeah.
Instagram, or wherever else. These people have the same kinds of things coming up in a rotation almost. And it's okay. I recognize it if I've seen it before, sure, but I haven't seen it for such a long period of
Long
time
time.
that it's like,
Right.
okay, well, that's an interesting reminder. Right?
Yeah, exactly. Right. And the thing about it is that you have to be able to, yes, have variety, but sometimes it's okay to have a reblog or a repost, of something. And a lot of my systems run off of the syndication. And what I'll do, and this is good, for business leaders for sure, is that if you take one piece of content and then you make multiple versions of it, especially like, let's just say the video wise, and I'm primarily talking about if you're using some type of software, whether it's Lumen 5 or Canva, you can create multiple different versions of the same thing, even within a matter of seconds, and then just have those on standby. And if you do use YouTube, you can load them up in YouTube and just have them in draft, and then you can pre-schedule them, if you choose to. But the importance of why we are talking about this is because content creation is always going to be major. And to save time and to be efficient, and what's the saying, King Rob? Work smarter, not
Yes,
harder.
smarter, not harder.
Yes.
Yes.
And so sometimes it is not to the highest advantage to always be putting out something new a certain way that's taking up a lot of time. You want to be able to maximize what you do through the power of leverage. That is smart business building, is when you can take a concept or something that you've done and you can maximize it, but not to the point where it is like, oh my gosh, it's the same thing, so to speak. But you can, I use templates, and I'll change out the template with a different product name or a different, but it's in the same field of that particular product. And you'd be amazed how well that does. Even though the template pretty much is the same, but it may have a little shorter music, or like I said, or the product feature for it is different. But it's, it's like I said, it's amazing. But since this is a short lunch and learn here, I think, we've given quite a bit of food for thought. But King Rob, I think ultimately the encouragement during this time is that leaders really do step up in terms of their content creation, but just being mindful how they're doing it. Allow yourself to debunk some of the myths around the way you need to be showing up. You have to really determine that for yourself. What's going to be consistent for you? What productions are you going to be using and leveraging, or different platforms? And King Rob and I, we've talked about this, in other segments, but you want to play to, as we started off talking about, play to your strengths and your mastery. And you want to work smarter, not harder. So it's different for everyone, but you definitely want to look at what's going to work best for your business and what's going to create the win-win. What's going to be efficient, what's going to take longer, how do you actually prioritize that? King Rob, your thoughts before we wrap up?
Well, I agree, and I would just say, recognize where your audience lives. Where are they,
Yes.
and what do they want to hear from you? And when you know that, that's your North Star. So
Yeah, absolutely. And sometimes you're not going to know that until you actually do repeat a few things to put out there. That's how people even determine, King Rob, in terms of what are their best-selling products. The product or so can't be just featured one time. It has to have some type of repetition, whether it is similar format or it is something different, but it's still out there, where people can know about it. So it's a lot of testing and tweaking that you do, but you do yourself a disservice when you don't actually have the content that is out there to lead people into something, not just an offer, an opportunity, but even just from a branding perspective. And that's a whole nother training. So we are going to bring this one to a close, King Rob. You think we've covered quite a bit here?
yeah, this has been a good one for sure.
Yeah, it's definitely been full for sure. So do you have any closing words, or you any parting words of empowerment, or are we just good to close out here?
I would just, your point about leverage, I think, is key here, because
Mhm.
people look at content creation as this huge time-consuming thing that's going to take a lot of effort. And it is a commitment, but once you start creating, you'd be surprised how many things you can get out of one
Yes.
session of content creation, and
Mhm.
repurpose that for so many other options, so many other things. So you just have to get into it.
That is the truth. Absolutely. Thank you, King Rob, always for your
Yeah.
brilliance. All right. Well, we're going to bring this virtual lunch and learn to a close. We hope it's been beneficial for you. Certainly, we've definitely given you some food for thought today for you to consider and customize your own success plan. There is no one size fits all. You know your business better than any expert, out there can say to you, but definitely take some of the advice for sure and apply it as you see fit. So we look forward to bringing you more in this series. Take care and wishing you all the best.